So the writing from Emmett Fox for the 28th of November is titled Fool's Gold. And he writes, in mining country, one comes across a valueless substance that is so like gold ore that inexperienced people cannot always tell the difference. This is called fool's gold. And many a young prospector has wasted much time and hard work before discovering that he's been deceived by the spurious article. Old-timers used to say to the tenderfoot, when you think you found gold, you probably haven't, but when you do find it, you will know for certain. So it is with the prospectors on the mountain range that we call life. There are many kinds of fool's gold to be found, but when you meet the genuine article, you will have no doubt in your mind. The true gold will give you a sense of peace and poise, a sense of freedom and power, because you will no longer be in bondage to passing material things. It will set you free from much of the tyranny of time and space beliefs. The true gold is that sense of the presence of God with us, to obtain which is the object of this life. And then from James, a quote, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights. So last week I told you that I wanted to talk about little blessings. And relevant to that, though I had not been aware at the moment, is the fact that this is the first night of Hanukkah. And in the story of Hanukkah is how, in a crisis, God worked a miracle, and 1 day's worth of oil for the sacred lamp lasted the 8 days until they were able to procure more from a distance. And the tradition is you light the starter candle, and then you light the first candle the first night to represent the first day of the miracle. Now we're talking about little blessings. We can think about this as the beginning of a set of little blessings, of enabling a people to have faith because they wanted to do right in the eyes of the Lord. We both receive and give, or at least we have the opportunity to receive and give little blessings. And that counts just as this light is for 1 day. And I'm going to remove this so it doesn't get in the way of the videoing. But this will be in my window for the next 8 days. This has been a rough time. What with COVID and the economic dislocation and the isolation, it's easy to lose track of the fact that we are connected with divine good, divine love. And as such, to drive ourselves down into a deeper and deeper hole. I found an article in the Washington Post, I'm going to read a few pieces of, an editorial writer who talked about the disappointments, the 20 months of life under the pandemic cloud, the isolation, the friendships that have faded away, how she allowed all the disappointments, all the stresses to led her to move herself into what she calls a low-grade resentment. And she writes, people around me noticed these emotional changes. My husband, she writes, gently asked me if I could complain less, since after each new annoyance, he bore the brunt of my frustration. Now, how many of us do that? Cell phone. So she reports she found herself, even though she's normally conflict avoidant, snapping rudely at store cashiers, or in other situations where she was mildly inconvenienced. She found a blog post that encouraged her to keep what they called a pleasure journal. And she wants to make sure we understand in her writing that she's not talking about sex. That it was a recommendation to record little everyday pleasures, which I will call blessings. And so she's 3 months into it now, keeping track of all things large and small which brought her delight, brought her satisfaction, brought her enjoyment. And she says even as she got into this, let herself be aware of the little blessings, even something, she writes, as mundane as a hot shower or singing along with the radio on a favorite song of hers, those brought her joy. She wrote it down. She was happier. And she realized how much she had been taking for granted the small things. So where I'm going is start keeping track of the small things and the big things. She writes toward the end of her article that one of the chief benefits she's noticed is that by writing down each pleasure of the day, small or large, enjoyment, pleasure, sense of receiving blessings is to the forefront of her thoughts, as opposed to the anger, the resentment, the anxiety, the tension, which had been to the forefront. So we're doing a perspective shift. And this is helping her deal better with what life's about. Well, as I was thinking about what I was writing today and going to talk about, I happened also to come across and was reading a book called A Day in the Life of the Amish, where something like 100 different Amish families were invited to write a journal, and they were sent a little point-and-click camera so they could take pictures during the day. And reading the journals for the day and thinking about being aware of little blessings, I was so struck by what they, as just a part of their reporting about their day, shared. And I've written some of them down because they don't see this as something super special, but it's each of them, it's part of their appreciation. And we should be thinking in terms of our blessing, our appreciation, our joy, as we make notes. So I'm just going to read a few of the lines that I came across. A beautiful sunset in the evening held promise of another nice day tomorrow. Good morning, Lord. You are usher of another new day, untouched and freshly new. So here come I to ask you, God, that you'll renew me too. I confess that one struck me. I don't know that I do that in that way, untouched, freshly new. Each day for each of us, we already know it's not promised to us. But have you considered at the morning of the day that it is an untouched day for you, fresh and new, for you to develop, for you to enjoy? Another writer wrote, with a peek out the window at the clear sky with the moon brightly shining, how can one not help breathing a prayer of thankfulness to the God who watches over us? Another one at end of day wrote, as the lights went out, I thank the Lord for another rewarding day. Now, when you read about the days of the Amish, it is toil after toil after toil, work after work. Even at, they normally seem to rise between 4 and 6 in the morning, and even the young kids are doing something to help prepare for the day. Going out and feeding the chickens, gathering eggs, helping whether make breakfast or make the lunches for the what they call the scholars, the up to 8th grade kids who are going to an Amish school. It is consistent work, and yet they find each day a pleasure for the day itself. Another wrote, speaking of the wooded hills that surround their small farm, if we had to pay for all this beauty, we'd never be able to afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a quote, I believe it was from James, truly, this was a morning consideration at the beginning of the writing, truly the light is sweet and a pleasant thing. It is for the eyes to behold the sun. Do we take enough pleasure? Do we allow ourselves to enjoy enough the small things like that? Or this was going on wintertime, I believe it was October. A sharp frosty wind breezing across the lawn pats my cheek. Ah, this fresh country air. And then she notes that it was a fairly stiff wind and 42 degrees. So here hath been dawning another new day. Think, wilt thou let it slip useless away? Think of the challenge of that. Each morning, the question to you is, wilt thou let it slip useless away? And if we do not find joy in the day, we have indeed wasted a day. For joy, for connecting with the divine, that's part of what we're responsible for. And if we are not connecting in these ways, how can we connect and feel the connection with the divine? Because that which the divine has given us, we are not paying attention to. Another of the families wrote, by 9 o'clock we called it a day and headed for the blessings of another night's rest with plenty of warm covers. No. That's a small blessing to me, but boy, I sure can tell the difference when I don't have enough covers on my bed. And then one family, the day before, there'd been a fire in one of their kerosene lanterns, which had severely damaged part of their building, part of their house. And as is true with the Amish, and they had Englisher friends also show up and help take out of the damaged building that which could be salvaged. And she says, after a prayer of thanks for kind people and friends, and the things we still have that were not burned, and that no one was hurt, we went to bed. Notice the focus. It's not, oh my God, the house is damaged, what will we do? It was the positive. And she reports that one thing they discovered is they were taking the undamaged stuff out of the burnt part of the house. People were carrying the bookcase out. The books hadn't been damaged. And one Bible had flipped open to a passage in Timothy, which she wrote down. You have brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out again. And having food and raiment, food and clothing, let us therefore be content. talk about being aware of the truly important blessings. An older retired Amish lady writes, "I love to sit and quilt and watch the snowflakes fly by." And yet another said, "God has surely been good to us. Do I appreciate all his goodness enough?" Which takes us back to, are you allowing yourself to recognize, to experience, to enjoy even the smallest of blessings? And then, this sure was a full day for all of us. Let's not forget to be thankful for everything. Another one writes about going to bed with the sounds of gentle southern breeze and the crickets chirping to sing us to sleep. Now, I went through all these. These will not necessarily be the ones that are relevant to you, but look at the consistency of the awareness. They're not thanking God for a big windfall. They're thanking God for being, for the small gifts. And I think if you take some time over this next week or two, but especially during Hanukkah, let yourself be aware of the small gifts. Journal it even. Maybe get in that habit so that it's easier and easier to always be in the appreciation and awareness mode. So far, what I've been doing is talking to you about your own life, your own gratitudes. And I suggest that if you look back over your life, you will see both large and small blessings, miracles, that helped shape your life to that which you are and who you are now. Now let's look at the other side, because it is not just for us to be aware of the blessings. It is also appropriate for us to give blessings. Going back to the family where part of the house had caught fire. Their Amish neighbors, their Englisher neighbors, showed up. And some of the women started taking all the smoke-filled clothes, curtains, everything to their houses to watch for them. The men were carrying out such furniture as the bookcase and the beds, which were also not damaged but smoke-filled. And they had another building on the property that they could live in while they were restoring their main house. Each of these people was giving small blessings. And I'm not just talking the action, but their words, their prayers, too. Even just walking down the street and greeting people with a smile. You don't know how big a blessing that may be to them. Think of it this way. You don't have to beat your chest. You don't have to be big and strong to have a powerful impression. My mother, when she taught school, and she taught first grade, made it a point to let every kid know that she cared about them, that she loved them. Late in her career, children she'd had for first grade who were now in college would come back to visit with her and share what their lives were about, because they understood. She, at least, cared. I think I mentioned the time Father Chuck had all the trouble that he could stand, and he got home from his work and marched in, as he tells the story, to the sanctuary and took the robe off, or the rope off his robe, threw it on the altar, took the robe off, threw it on the altar, and told God he'd had it, that he wasn't going to do any priesting anymore. He was done. And then he walked down to his apartment to make himself some food and figure out what to do next. As he recounts it, for the next 3 hours, people he hadn't seen in years called him to thank him for the influence he'd had in their lives. He had no idea. Because when you give small blessings, ideally you're not doing it for your gratification. You're doing it out of the love of God and in God that spills out from your heart. Phyllis, when she walks down the street, stuns me how many of the people she knows that I may have seen only in passing. And she asks how they're doing, says hi to them. Some of them come and talk to her about what's going on, particularly if they're struggling a bit. She prays with them. What you do must reflect you, but don't be hesitant to give little gifts of love, little blessings. Someone drops something, you pick it up, hand it to them with a smile. That's a little blessing. You say, yeah, I hear you're going through a tough time. I'm going to hold you in prayer. Or maybe you show up at their doorstep with food in a wrapper saying, I overcooked, so could you use some hamburgers or hot dogs or whatever it is that you have an excuse to do. Be open to different ways. Be open to ways that may seem like nothing to you, but it may mean everything to somebody else. I think a lot of you know that I read a lot of agony columns, so I can be prepared when someone dealing with that particular issue shows up at my doorstep. And recently, in the commentary section, several people talked about a person in their lives who, without being obvious about it, had clearly given something that meant so much to them, they still remembered it many years later. It's what made the Quakers in the old days such powerful representatives for a God of love. Because they treated with kindness, and remember I've done a talk on loving kindness recently, everybody who came into their sphere of action. You can do the same. Even locked down under COVID, or if we end up under COVID Omicron, a phone call, a text, I've been thinking about you, how are you doing? Something that I've gotten in the habit of doing, people that I work with in the various marriage bureaus, because I do a fair number of weddings, and often enough we need to sort something out. I make it a habit toward the end of the year to send each wedding bureau a small box of chocolates with a thank you for all the help they've given me. And once in a while, one of them sends me a note saying, thank you, we so appreciate being thought of. A recent article was written by someone who's on the ground crew for airlines, was talking about how rough it has been and is for them now with so many grumpy and angry people. And she said, once in a while, someone shows up at the gate to go through and they hand me some chocolate cookies, or they hand me a freshly pulled Starbucks. And that means so much to me. Just recognizing a person in everyday life. Phyllis and I both, I notice, when we are going through a checkout, I try to find something positive to say to the lady, or the gentleman, if it's a gentleman, who's doing the checkout. Oh, those are gorgeous fingernails, is one that I use. Or, I surely hope that the rest of your day is pleasantly uneventful. That always gets a big smile, because they hope so too. But what is it? You have recognized them as a person rather than a robot. Cast your mind over the next few days as you interact with people. Seek inspiration from above, seek inspiration within yourself for how you can bring a little light, or maybe two little lights, to people around you. Might be an interesting challenge if you do this all week. Seek to find at least one opportunity each day to bring a small blessing to someone who may not have had a blessing in a long time. We thank you, God, for having created this community, for allowing all of us to have found one another, to share, to care, to love, to learn. We thank you for enabling us to join each other at this time on Sundays. We thank you for all the good that you have been raining down upon us, all the good you're preparing for, all the healings, all the joys, all the growth in you. We thank you for watching over us as we depart from here, guiding our steps, guiding our mouths, guiding our hands so we can be your representative of good on this earth, your representative of love on this earth, and that we can grow ever more in you and with you. For all this good, for all the caring that you give, God, we say thank you. And we thank you for guiding us back here again soon, so that we can share in this community and grow in love together. We give you thanks for all the good that has come, all the good that is coming, dear God. Thank you, and amen.